Okay, shalom, and welcome to SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. This is our ongoing class in the book of Galatians, and we're in the middle of Galatians chapter 5 right now. So grab your Bible, or since you're online already, how about some kind of text that you can work with, and join on in. Okay, this is SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship, and that's spelled SYMCHATYESHUA. We do have a website, and that is simchatyeshua.org, as well as a Facebook page, Simchat Yeshua. And let's see, I always have to remember to do all the YouTube stuff, like to like, subscribe, share with others, and hit the bell if you want to be notified when these classes go live. We meet together every Wednesday at 6 o'clock California time, whichever daylights or not saving lights that is. And so welcome. Some of you already come on. Don't forget to say hello, and let me know who you are so I can say hello back to you. Okay, if you are interested in supporting the operation of this channel or the congregation, there's a way to donate through our website. So simchatyeshua.org. You can go over there and take care of that business. Just don't do it on Shabbat, which is why I'm mentioning it today, because it's Wednesday. Okay. It is right on 6 o'clock right now. So I'm going to vamp here for a couple minutes to see if anybody else wants to come in and join with us. And we will then proceed. We're in the middle of Galatians chapter 5. Let me pull up where we're going to be reading for the day. Okay, we're going to be doing verses 13 through 15. There's so much stuff in the way of commentary and stuff that it's kind of slow right now, a couple verses at a time. If you endured my course in Matthew many, many years ago, this is what happened. We would do, or even when we did Deuteronomy, Devarim, we do a couple verses at a time. And it took forever to get through the book, but it was so nice to have the time to go in depth and to try to get as much detail as possible out of our study time. And so it did take, I think, 4.5 years to go through Matthew, if you want to say it more pronouncedly, or more Israeli, call it Mattai. Call him Mattai, but either way, it's all the same guy. God, I just blanked on myself here. So anyways, it was slow. It took us a long time. I think it took us 2-3 years to get through Deuteronomy. I was going much faster with that one. Okay. Let me rattle off a couple of details about the book of Galatians. One of the things that prompted me to teach Galatians is that it's a very often heavily misunderstood and mistaught letter. Paul wrote to the Galatian congregations the congregations in the region of Galatia, which was a mix of Jew and Gentile organizations there. And the big issue that he's writing about is warning Gentiles to not make the conversion to Pharisaism. In so doing, Shaul, that's Paul's name in Hebrew, is a masterful theologian but a lousy letter writer. And what he's done is simply, in his letter, touch on stuff that everybody already knew the arguments, and so he just touched on certain topics and didn't explain them well. He didn't need to, because that's what was his audience. He didn't write with the expectation that 2,000 years later we're going to be reading that same text and thinking to myself, what does he mean by this? And so you end up with at least 3 major issues that you have to deal with when you come to Galatians. First off is the use of the word law, nomos in Greek, since that's the basic text that we have these days. We'll go with the Greek. And he uses some version of the word nomos, at least 4 different ways in all of his writings, but he uses it in 2 specific ways in his letter to the Galatians. First one is the normal thinking of how we would read nomos as law, and more specifically, um, um, it refers to Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, and by extension, the Tanakh, which is the entire Bible. And some people go as far as to extend that title to the rabbinic writings, the Pharisaic writings, the traditions of the elders and the sages and all that stuff, which is labeled as oral Torah compared to the written Torah that Moses gave us in written form. And you'll find that there's some difficulties in understanding what Paul's talking about, because he uses the word nomos interchangeably and without explanation. So without clear definition, which version of what he's talking about. So you have to look at the context. The context will drive the translation. And so, using the word nomos when talking about God's commandments, that's pretty obvious. When he's using the word nomos talking about the traditions of the Pharisees, then he's talking about the Pharisee rules, not the commandments of God. And of course, what confuses the issue, of course, within Pharisaism of the day and even in modern Orthodox Judaism, you have this mushing together of Torah and Torah by their definition, where you have the Moshe's written Torah, Moses' written Torah, and then you have the man-made rules that are all piled up on it, all mixed in together, called the oral Torah. However, when you're dealing with the Pharisees and with the Orthodox, they don't differentiate. From their point of view, it's all one. As Messianics, we have a responsibility, because this is exactly what Paul teaches us to the Galatians, is that there is a difference between man-made tradition and God's written commandments. And so when we run into the word law, especially the phrase works of the law, because that's specific to Pharisaism, the works of the law, you have to stop and think, okay, which version of law is Paul talking about? Okay, that's one item. Second item is the position of a Gentile in the community of God. Even though Torah and the whole Tanakh, the whole of the Bible, has multiple constant references to the fact that the Gentiles are to be included into God's kingdom, even as Gentiles, and they will be considered as one who is native born if they come and join themselves to Israel. And despite that constant reference, within Pharisaism of that day and Orthodox of today, put a great barrier between Gentiles and joining the community of Israel by requiring a circumcision, or requiring conversion. And that's the second big issue with terminology, is there is a biblical commandment of circumcision, that a boy who was newborn on 8 days is to have a circumcision. There's nothing to say that commandment is removed or excluded or somehow not valid, but that's not the circumcision Paul's talking about. The key to the discussion is the act of the circumcision, but it's the conversion to Pharisaism of his day, or even to Orthodox of today. That is the point of the argument. That circumcision is the last act of making that conversion process. You attend the synagogue, you convince everybody that you're sincere about wanting to convert. If you get past all the training and the education and the bet din, and they're willing to accept you, then the last things you do is that you will do tevilah, that is a mikveh, a baptism. You go down a Gentile, you come up a Jew, and now you are a new creation. Okay, if you wonder where Paul's picture of the baptism, dying to self and coming up a new creation, it's the same idea. Okay, that hasn't changed throughout time. But now you're a new creation. Now what do? Well, according to Torah, if you're male, you get a circumcision. And so you have 8 days to get a circumcision to complete your conversion process. That's the circumcision in the discussion that Shaul makes to the Galatian congregations. Not the commandment of circumcision in the Bible, but the conversion to Pharisaism through that last act of which is the circumcision. Okay, and I know there's a third thing that I usually try to explain, and I'm blanking. We'll run into it, I'm sure. So I'll explain that in more detail as we get further in. Okay, our course today is verses 13 through 15 of chapter 5 of Galatians. I'm going to start at verse 11 just to get a short running start, then we'll get into our text for the day. And I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? Then the offense of the cross has ceased. I could wish that those who trouble you would even cut themselves off. Okay, now our text for the day. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, beware. Let me roll my screen up here. Beware lest you be consumed by one another. Okay, that's our text for the day. All right, Shalom Ruhama. How you doing? If I can remember, I will jump over to check the chat box to see if anybody has any questions, comments, or rebukes. Please feel free to put in something there. I do eventually remember to check that once in a while during the course of this. So, and I will try to remember to do it frequently. However, the reality is I get to talking and I forget what I'm doing. Now, if you notice from my reading the text for the day, my reading is a little bit wonky. And that is, I've been having issues with my eyes. I've had a few surgeries, and I've now had a second cataract surgery, so I have new headlights in each eye. The difficulty, of course, the healing process has been slow and difficult, and things have gotten a little bit fuzzier than they should have over the last couple of days. So keep my eyes in prayer that I can recover very well and eventually put this whole episode behind me. I have an appointment with my eye doctor tomorrow morning to address what's going on. So the net result right now is that my reading, everything is fuzzy, and so my reading is a little bit strange. And if you notice on my screen that you're looking at my screen right now, so you're going to notice that the print's bigger than normal, and that's because I have the screen blown up to where I can read it a little bit better. So hopefully it's not so wonky with reading here, but so please understand and just keep my eyes in prayer, and please you can resist the temptation to lay hands on my eyes because that would hurt. Not just kidding. Okay, let's get into it, and let's get going. Okay, it's always good to start off with somebody's commentary just to add, stuff to what we're talking about here. Okay, where is my? There it is. Okay. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. Okay, that's actually okay. So what I did here, I marked that as a quotation, but that's somebody's actually just citing scripture. Yechezkel, or Ezekiel 36, verses 26, 27. By the way, this is one of my favorite verses because it shows that even if you're a Gentile, the result of embracing Messiah is to love God's commandments and to walk in them. Okay, and part of the many counter arguments that go on in Galatians is no, we're not seeking to do the commandments of God in order to get saved, but rather our desire to obey God is a result of our sanctification, is a result of our salvation, that we love God enough to want to live by His ways. And so our focus on keeping the commandments of God is not for salvation's sake, but for relationship's sake, with God and with one another. Okay, verse 13. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Okay? For you, excuse me. For you, for freedom, were called, brethren, only not the freedom for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve you one another. That's a quote. That's cited as through Englishman's Greek New Testament. My Greek is if my eyesight's kind of wonky, my Greek is even worse. I kind of like this because it, as far as I know, that's pretty close to word for how the Greek lays out. And I just like to see the syntax and flow of the original language. It sometimes helps you understand things a little better. Okay, liberty. And I already warned you that my Greek is terrible, so it's eleuthes deria. Yeah, let it go. Now, there's a couple of issues with translation, or potential issues with translation, and so I'm quoting my old Strong's Concordance book for the definition here, which means freedom, legitimate, or licentious, chiefly moral or certain or certainty. Okay, liberty. Strong's Concordance from Blue Letter Bible, which, believe it or not, has a habit of retranslating things. Liberty to do or to omit things having no relationship to salvation. Very important point to people who trust Blue Letter Bible, because what that's suggesting then is only in matters of salvation, or other than matters of salvation, our freedom is paramount. And that's not the point that Paul's making. In this case, our freedom, okay, is not freedom from the law, but freedom for the law. Remember who he's talking to. Paul is writing to Gentiles in the congregation. Okay, there is much historically there was much pressure to make the Gentiles in the Galatian region convert to Pharisees. Okay, so the freedom that's being spoken of here is not freedom from God. It's not freedom from God's commandments, but rather it is freedom from the need to be a Pharisee, freedom from Pharisaism. Okay? Now, just because you're free from Pharisaism, which has a whole bunch of rules and regulations on top of God's written commandments, it doesn't mean you're free to sin. In other words, making an occasion for the flesh. And we'll talk about that when we get to that little bit of the phrase. But understand, that's the argument. So Paul had already acknowledged that amongst the Gentiles in the Galatian region, they are filled with the Spirit of God, that there are miracles of God happening around them. And so Paul makes the argument that what else do you need to be part of the family? How does becoming a Pharisee improve your familyness? How does it improve your relationship with God? And Paul's argument throughout this letter is that it does nothing to aid you in your relationship with God. Only that if you become a Pharisee through the conversion process, which involves that circumcision, then you obligate yourself to do everything they tell you to do. And this which he states, emphatically that that's a giant negative. Why? Because there's all sorts of add-on stuff with Pharisaism, and even with modern Orthodox. There's a whole bunch of add-on stuff that does nothing as far as helping you walk in the commandments of God. If you want to make sure that the only way you get up in the morning is you must recite a particular blessing as soon as you open your eyes, and you have to put your socks on in the morning, right foot first, then your left foot. You have to put your shoes on, right foot first, then your left foot. All these rules and stuff about, keeping that. If you want to follow all that stuff, just understand that once you obligate yourself, especially through that conversion process, you're stuck with your word. Okay? So don't make promises you can't keep, or eventually you may not want to keep. Okay? One of the reasons there's so much reticence to allow for converts is just that. People come in not understanding all the details of that walk, and then realize that there's so much extra added detail than just Bible that it's no longer worthwhile. And so they quit the whole thing. Or worse, people thinking that they're going to convert the whole congregation to Yeshua. That's Jesus in English. Jesus in English, Yeshua is his Hebrew name. Convert people to Yeshua by joining, and it doesn't work. The harsh reality is the result of all that is that even amongst someone who faithfully makes a conversion, they're usually not trusted in the community. They're usually kept at an arm's length. So just be aware. And so, someone's going to make an emotional argument with you maybe someday. Say, oh, no, you can't possibly be in the family of God unless you be like us. Okay? And that's the argument that Paul was warning you against. Don't be a sucker for this one, because you already have everything you need. If the Spirit is in you and miracles are happening around you, you already have proof that you have everything you need to be in the family of God. You don't need to make a conversion. So, okay, so where am I now? Freedom. Okay, so you have a difference in translation. Okay, so Strong's, Blue Letter Bible changes Strong's definition to liberty to do or omit things having no relation to salvation. Okay, fancied liberty, license, the liberty to do as one pleases. True liberty is living as we should, not as we please. Okay, so they add as a definition there, which is actually item number 3 in that definition is actually a good one, because liberty, it has nothing to do with I can do anything I want freedom, but rather I am free to choose to do the right thing. That's the liberty. We're not yet in a slave state. We're not yet in a Soviet kind of state to where we are obligated to do things that we don't want to do, unless of course getting up in the morning and going to work is one of the no, you are obligated to that. Your wife and your kids do obligate you to do that. Okay. Anyways, so beware the translations. And this wasn't the one that got me started, but there's a couple other times where you get zingers in the online translation compared to what the more original Strong's Concordance translates. So just be careful with that. Okay. Okay. You are free from sinful lusts to pursue holiness. This is the argument. Okay. This is not a statement against Torah, but encouragement to live without hindrance to Torah. In other words, we are free to obey. We are free to walk in God's ways. Okay? And it's a good thing to do so. We are not free to pursue our own desires, that is, the flesh in this argument. So definition of flesh, sarki in Greek. Again, this is another possibly questionable translation. It's probably from the base of 45:63, flesh has as stripped on the skin, as stripped of the skin, that is, the muscles and sinews showing, or more strictly, the meat of an animal as food, or by extension, the body as opposed to soul or for spirit, or as a symbol, by implication, human nature with its frailties, physical or not, and passions, or specifically a human being as such, carnally minded or fleshly. Okay, that's a big definition. Okay, in other words, what normally we would call meat. Okay, and so we have to regard our bodies as having all the class and holiness and godliness of meat. All right. Now, the online Blue Letter Bible translation uh, translates as the flesh denotes mere human nature, the earthly nature of man apart from divine influence, and therefore prone to sin and opposed to God. Now, that's a minor difference, but nonetheless, at the time I did my original research on this, it seemed to be a larger difference. Now I'm reading and going, it's not that bad. But probably the apart from divine influence. Okay, the earthly nature of man. No, come to think of it, never mind. All right. We're called to love as opposed to freedom giving rise to the sin of self-indulgence. Love leads to self-sacrifice, that is obedience to God and serving the needs of others. Okay, so this is what we're called to do. Perhaps as a wordplay, opposing the demands of Pharisaism for the flesh to continue to conform in ritualism for acceptance into the community, compared to love as the only real evidence needed to show belonging to the family. Okay, very important commentary there. Okay. So we're to deny the desires of the flesh, and that's supposed to produce in us the ability to walk in God's ways. Okay, and to love God and His people. Okay. Also, commentary, additional statement to check out Romans 13:8-10. So I put it in here just so we can check it out. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, and if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Okay. So we can fulfill the law by doing no harm to our neighbor, or doing things that would harm our neighbor. And that's sort of the point out of Romans 13, taking care of that. Okay, let's move on. Still on verse 13. Until now, Shaul has been preaching freedom, but here he issues a necessary caution against antinomianism, big word, defined as abasing freedom by turning it into license. Okay, this is Dr. Stern's commentary. Antinomianism, nomos, if you remember, is the Greek word for law. So anti means against, law, ism. Okay, as a mentality or way of life or a philosophy, against law, philosophy. Okay. At the time this commentary was done, this was extremely important to make this point strenuously, that Shaul was not saying chuck the commandments of God, chuck the law of God, but rather he said the no we're supposed to say no to is our fleshly desire. Okay? And that fleshly desire shows up also on one hand, in one opposite direction, antinomianism, going against the law, and the other side is hypernomianism, which is taking laws to the extreme. And this is where you get the Pharisaism and modern Orthodox, which have a huge pile of additional rules and regulations piled on top of God's commandments, sometimes superseding in their mind God's commandments. And so you have either direction is not good. However, Dr. Stern's commentary is focused on antinomianism. That's okay. That's okay. Paul repeats his caution to his Gentile disciples on this reading. The only thing he wishes them to do is to avoid giving an opportunity for the flesh by seeking social status within the Jewish community. Okay, that's one of the things we need to be aware of. We don't need social status. If we need acceptance, from whom do we gain acceptance? From God himself, from Yeshua himself, right? That's where we need acceptance. And all the other acceptance that we will receive flows from there. Okay. Each has a unique freedom to choose to follow only the written commandments of the Torah and to do what was written by Moses. There is no need for a binding authority of oral tradition that directs you away from trusting in the written word. By putting into practice the written commandments and relying upon Yehovah to help us to do the right thing, this is true faith. We will behave towards each other according to the gifts of the Spirit spoken about in Galatians 5:22 and 23. Put another way, which we're going to get to rather shortly, the written Torah is something beautifully spiritual that, if obeyed, will naturally permeate our hearts and minds to serve each other according to its stated decrees that governs behavior between one person and another. In this way, the Torah guides us to give fair and honest treatment one to another. Okay? And then one beautifully rhetorical question. Would the Spirit of God ever lead us to disobey God's instructions? Give you a second to think about that. Because how many times do you hear somebody in certain circles tell us that we don't need to follow God's instructions? Okay? So is that guided by the Spirit of God? We call that the Deuteronomy 13 test. If you want to check that out. The first 5 verses, what's stated there is not extremely directly on point, but the issue there is, if anybody tells you to do anything than what is written and given by Moses, don't take them seriously. So if they're trying to cancel Moses, if they're trying to redirect Moses, they're trying to add to Moses, you needn't take them seriously. Okay? And that's what we call the Deuteronomy 13 test. Okay. Let me check something here. Okay, any other questions, comments, or rebukes yet? Okay. Verse 14. Hey, we're just ripping through this. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. For the whole law in one word is fulfilled, in you shall love your neighbor as yourself, out of Englishman's Greek New Testament. If you start hearing a Star Wars character as they're talking during reading that Englishman's Greek New Testament, yeah, there's one particular character who seems to have gotten his speaking syntax from Greek. Anyways, Yeshua did a similar statement in Matthew 22:36-40. Also follow up with James 2:8. Okay. The negative version is quoted by Hillel. This is actually rabbinic commentary. It's cool when they accidentally agree with Scripture. Not accidentally, but you know what I mean. What is hateful to you, do not to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah, while the rest is commentary. Therefore, go and learn it. Interesting situation from which that quotation is taken. But that's a different discussion for a different day. Paul's thought demonstrates evidence of an exegetical tradition of Leviticus 19:18, according to which reward and punishment are predicated not on awe of God, but on love for one's fellow beings. Okay, interesting, interesting point of view. And I agree with the idea, but a little too strongly worded, because God does not want us to ignore the commandments concerning our relationship with Him, but rather He elevates our relationship to one another to the same level of how we treat God. We should be treating one another, with that same fear, that same awe, that same reverence, that same love. So it's commentators often try to word things strongly, so it comes across with greater impact. But I'd say that's probably a little overstated, but the basic idea is cool. That God wants us to obey His commandments with regards to our neighbor just as fervently as the commandments concerning our how we behave with God. Okay, Deuteronomy 6:1-2. All the instructions of God are the commandment. If anybody wanted to ask about that, what is the commandment? Well, Deuteronomy 6:1-2. Okay, all of what God said. Okay, Mark 7:9. Men often reject the commandment of God in order to keep the tradition. This is a stark warning to antinomians today. Okay, again, those who are against the law. Now, you would think that's possibly misstated, but the actual reality is that being anti-law, people often invent their own rules and then require that you follow their rules in place of God's rules. And so that's the warning there. Okay. And this is true for Pharisaism of Paul's day, and it's true of Orthodox today, and it's also true of many branches of Christianity that invent their own rules and require people to follow them, even if those rules contradict God's commands. Okay? And so we have to be careful about that. The whole of the Torah is summed up in one sentence, which is Leviticus 19:18, which Shaul also used in this way at Romans 13:8-10, compared also to Yaakov or James 1:27. Judaism contains a number of epitomes of Torah. One of the best known passages, naming several of them, is in the Talmud. And this is just rabbinic commentary. You can ooh and ah over the interest of it, or just say, oh, okay. Rabbi Simlai said, 613 commandments were given to Moses. 365 negative mitzvot, those are commandments, same as the number of days of the year, and 248 positive mitzvot, same as the number of parts of a man's body. David came and reduced them to 11 out of Psalm 15, Isaiah to 6, Isaiah 13:15, Michael to 3, Micah 6:8, and to Yeshayahu or Isaiah again to 2, observe justice and do righteousness, Isaiah 56:1. Then Amos came and reduced them to 1, Seek me and live, Amos 5:4. As did Habakkuk, the righteous one will live by his trusting, Habakkuk 2:4. And this is a quotation of Tractate Makot 23b, or 24a in the abridged version. Okay. Also take a look at Matthew 7:12. Therefore, whatsoever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Okay, if you want someone to be nice to you, guess what? Be nice to them. If you want someone to be honest with you, be honest with them. Okay. When you might have revenge, do not repay either your neighbor or your enemy. This is the Enoch chapter 30 verses 1 through 4. Well, it's probably not the whole citation, but that's where it's from. See Matthew 23:23. When Yeshua states the observance of the mitzvot commandments is not the reason we exist, but that the mitzvot are the means by which we show our love for God and each other. Okay. Checking to see if there's any other questions, comments, or rebukes yet. Let me do something real quick. Sorry to do this, but my daughter's on her way back from San Diego. Okay, no big deal. And she's just giving me her status. We're hanging out and having fun. Thank you very much. I'm right in the middle of a study. All right. There we are. Okay, verse 15. But if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. Okay, but if one another you bite and devour, take heed, not by one another you be consumed. English from Greek New Testament. Biting frequently serves as a metaphor for usury in rabbinic texts. The Hebrew root nashak, conveying the sense of that interest which bites into the debtor. Okay, arguing and hating each other based on traditional observances is counter to Messiah's work and the Spirit within us. The only result is self-destruction of the family. Okay, I like that commentary. Okay, so if we're basing our intolerance for one another based on tradition, it's not a good method. Now, if somebody wants to follow the rules of Pharisaism or modern days Orthodox, they're free to take that on. The only warning Paul gives is that you obligate yourself to do all of it for the rest of your life. There's no way coming back, 6 weeks later and go, oh, just kidding, didn't really mean it. No, you've made your word, you've made your promise. Now you got to live it. Okay, so this is why you have all the warning about don't even go that way. Don't even go that way. Remember, the commandment is don't make an oath. You don't sin if you don't make an oath. But you're going to need to make an oath if you want to become a Pharisee or to become Orthodox. So even Torah says don't make an oath, but they're going to require it of you. Otherwise, you won't be, included. And that's perfectly good. You don't need that to be part of the family anyways. Torah says otherwise. Factionalism is a major threat to the to the communal life of God's people. Compare also verses 26, Yochanan 17:21, 1 Corinthians 1:10 and following, also 3:1 and following. Okay. Take a look at Matthew again, Matthew 23:14. For more on the idea of devouring each other while maintaining a facade of holiness, you have Matthew 23:14 just happened to list it there. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour women's houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Okay, so if you take the devouring as having to do with having to pay usury, which means that a Pharisee might loan some money to a widow for a loan against the house, using the house as collateral. She can't pay back, so now he gets her thrown out so he can collect the house as the collateral. And at the same time making long prayers to show how holy he is. Okay, and so what is the greater? What is the sin? The sin is loaning someone something that they can't repay on the likeliness that you're going to get a much bigger um, uh, much bigger return on the sale of that house than you would have ever done on collecting the payments back from the person. And then you show up at the synagogue and you make big, loud, long prayers about how holy you are. Okay, the ancients use the metaphor of being eaten by others as a grotesque description of a horrible fate or inconceivable wickedness, such as exploitation, literal cannibalism, horrified ancient sensibilities, even more than modern ones. Sensibilities, that is. Okay. Just as love wants to bring the dead back to life and to recall those under sentence of death, so hate wants to kill the living and does not wish to preserve alive those who have committed the slightest sin. For among all men, the spirit of hatred works by Satan through human frailty for the death of mankind. But the spirit of love works by the law of God through the forbearance of the salvation of mankind. And this is an extra biblical work called the Testament of Gad. But it's a great idea. It's a great thought, a great sentiment. Okay. So this is our warning. We should not be arguing with each other. If you want to argue Torah and different understandings, different points of view, that's fine. That's what we do in our congregation. If you haven't been to our shul, it's a refreshing change of somebody lecturing you and telling you what you're going to believe. In our congregation, we don't do a seminary style of thing where I tell you what's right and you have to agree with me. We do a yeshiva kind of arrangement where you're allowed to talk and disagree. You can agree. I would like that too. But if you disagree, that's okay. Get your idea out and we can talk it through. And in that interchange, iron sharpens iron, we will find truth. And so I'm not afraid of someone wanting to disagree with me. All I ask is that it be done respectful. It's okay to be passionate about what you embrace, but be respectful. That's all I ask. And, and we work things through. And if you've been to the congregation, people that come find it massively refreshing. That one, you can ask questions, and two, you can talk through things. And I guess that's my commercial to look us up on our webpage and come and visit us if you happen to be cruising around West Covina, California, or anywhere in the continuous 48 states. Just pop right on over. Anyways, let me check one more time, see if there's any other commentary on our thing. Okay, that's fine. Oops. There we are. Okay. Barring any other questions, comments, or rebukes, this will wrap us up for the day. Again, be sure to, if you haven't yet, to like, to subscribe, to share, and to ring the bell so you get notified when we go live. We meet every Wednesday at 6 o'clock California time for our online studies. Um, we're halfway through chapter 5 of Galatians. We will be finishing after next chapter, unless I feel like writing some new. No, no, never mind. We will be picking a new topic or new subject or new course or whatever during following the following Galatians. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for what to cover next, what to do next, just let me know, and we'll get into it. And we'll see if I can get into it. If it well, the way my eyes are right now, I can't do long, hard sessions of research. My eyes just go fuzzy too easily. So I'm kind of stuck with stuff I've already done before that I can update and upgrade, and save myself some of the strain of just setting it up all new. So having said that, we got I got tons of stuff. We've been doing this for 20 years, and most all those Bible studies I have saved. So um, so there's plenty of room to do stuff. Anyways, so be sure to, like I said, to like to all that stuff. And if you feel like you've gotten something useful out of this, you can go over to the website. There's a means of supporting the channel and the congregation. So feel free to throw in a few shekels to help things. Well, actually, this is I don't uh, I don't do this for any kind of pay on top of what I normally do. Um, it's not that we need this, or God's not going to be able to continue this program. It's more that if you want to help out, you're free to help out. Okay, and that's fine. Okay, last chance for questions, comments, or rebukes. Otherwise, we'll start shutting down. I am informed that sometimes there's a long delay with from the time I speak to the time it comes out on your end. So rather than chop that short accidentally, I'm going to spend a couple minutes just going silent, and hopefully, if there is any delay, it gets all caught up before I close it off. So God bless you. Shalom. We'll see you Shabbat, and we'll see you next Wednesday, 6 o'clock California time, right here on this channel. All right. Shalom. I'm going to go silent at this point. Okay? God bless you.